Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to XJW Diaries, where we can talk about life as a Jehovah's Witness and as an ex-Jehovah's Witness. My name is Justin, and this is diary entry number 3, JW 101. So this video will primarily be for the people that were never Jehovah's Witnesses. That maybe you have a friend that is, or co-workers that are, or a family member that is, or maybe you're just curious. So my hope is to give you a good overview of some common Jehovah's Witness topics, the organizational structure, and some things that set them apart from a traditional church. Now, I always stress, do your own research, don't just take my word for it. So if you ever feel the need to fact check me, go over to the Jehovah's Witness official website, and everything that I'm saying, you can back up right there. So I'm going to keep this nice, short, simple, and sweet. But at the same time, I want to give you guys enough information to where you can fill in the loop when you're talking to an active witness, or when you're watching one of my videos, or some videos from another XJW YouTuber. That way you know what's going on, you can understand the words, and you can get something out of it. So with all that said, let's get into it. So to start things off, let's talk about paradise. Now, most Christians believe that after you die, if you're a good person, you'll go off to heaven, which is this beautiful place where you can forever exist in pure happiness and be reunited with loved ones. And if you live a bad life, well, you get to go straight to hell or purgatory or some sort of punishment. Now, heaven sounds like a great place, but think about it. There's one big problem. You gotta die to go there. And that brings us to paradise. Now, paradise is also referred to as quote-unquote the new system. And one key difference being that while heaven is in some other dimension out there somewhere, paradise is right here on earth. So here's the short version. The witnesses believe that after Armageddon, the world would be restored back to the way it was in the Garden of Eden. And along with that, the human DNA will also be restored, and everybody will be perfect. This means humans will now live forever, and they will never get sick, and any disabilities that we have nowadays will be reversed and fixed. So the deaf will hear again, the blind will see again, and so on. And the unique part is that if you survive through Armageddon, you will get to go right into paradise without ever having to die. So big difference there. To get into paradise, you don't have to die. So who will be there? Well, there's 4 main groups. Number 1 is any witness who is living a good life. Number 2 is resurrected witnesses who died before Armageddon. Number 3 is resurrected people who never got a chance to hear the Jehovah's Witnesses message. They will be given another chance to hear the message and accept the message, and then be able to live forever in a paradise. And if they don't accept the message, we'll get to that. And then the last group is the resurrected people from biblical times. Now, anyone not allowed in paradise, or those people that were resurrected who didn't accept the message, they will simply be erased. Jehovah's Witnesses do not believe in any sort of hell or eternal punishment. So this is why the witnesses put such high priority on knocking on doors, because they believe that they are giving you your last chance to hear the truth, and therefore be allowed in paradise. So speaking of the truth, what is that? Well, the truth is what witnesses call their message and their doctrine, and it's also used as a way to refer to the organization. So you'll sometimes hear witnesses ask each other, when did you come into the truth? Or, were you born in the truth? Or they might say, I'm so happy I have the truth. Think about this. After all of those years of saying the truth and using those words to refer to the Jehovah's Witnesses, that definitely digs deep into your subconscious mind, to the point where when you see those words, the truth, you automatically think of Jehovah's Witnesses. So years and years later, when you start to question things, you better bet it makes it that much harder to ever think that the witnesses don't have the truth, because you've already associated those 2 words together. You see what I'm saying? So you basically hypnotized yourself. Can you see why it's so hard to leave? Alright, so moving on from that, let's talk about baptism. So in a typical church, you would attend for a while, and if you like what you hear, you go to the pastor and you ask to be baptized. And that's about it. They read you some scriptures, they dunk you in, boom, you're in the club. Now for witnesses, getting baptized is a whole process. So first you have to study with a baptized witness, who's in good standing. And after a while, you can ask the elders to become what is known as an unbaptized publisher. And basically this means that you have some understanding of the religion and that you are now required to turn in a monthly field service report. And I'll talk more about that later. So after you study for a while, then you can ask the elders to get baptized. And if they approve you for baptism, then you will privately meet with 3 elders. And in these 3 meetings, the elders will ask you several questions about the Bible and about Jehovah's Witness doctrine to make sure you have a good understanding of everything. And if you answer these questions correctly, then you will be eligible to get baptized at the next convention or assembly. Now, when that convention or assembly comes, then you sit in a special area for all the baptism candidates, and at some point, a special baptism talk will be given. And during this talk, the speaker asks the baptism candidates to stand up, and then he asks them 2 questions. And these questions are, have you repented of your sins, dedicated yourself to Jehovah, and accepted his way of salvation through Jesus Christ? And then you would say, loudly, yes. And then the second question is, do you understand that your baptism identifies you as one of Jehovah's Witnesses in association with Jehovah's organization? And again, all the baptism candidates would yell out yes. So did you catch that? There lies another major difference between the witnesses and most Christian churches. See, in most Christian churches, you're baptized in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. In the witnesses, you are baptized in the name of the Jehovah's Witness organization. At that point, you are initiated, you're in the club, you're officially a witness. They'll call you brother so-and-so or sister so-and-so. You're in. Okay, cool. So now you're baptized. You're in the club. But what happens if you change your mind? Consider this. The average witness gets baptized between ages 12 to 17. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm not going to take life advice from a 12-year-old. In my case, I was 15 when I got baptized. A week ago, I just turned 30. So I've been 15 twice now. And let me tell you, there's no way I would take advice from 15-year-old me. So this is another area where witnesses are very different compared to your average church. So let's make an example to help you understand better. Let's say you're going to church, you like what you hear, and then you start regularly going and you become a member, and you get baptized, and you make a lot of friends. And you have one friend in particular who we'll call Mike. Now, Mike is a mechanic, and a very good one. So now let's fast forward a few years, and for one reason or another, you decide to no longer be a member of that church, and you stop attending. Now, one day, your car breaks down, and you're stuck on the side of the road, and then your friend Mike sees you, and he recognizes you. Now I ask you, what do you think Mike will do? Well, most likely he'll probably pull over, help you out, maybe even take you out to lunch and catch up. That's because your average church doesn't have a shunning policy. So now let's run that same scenario, but as a Jehovah's Witness. So you're going to meetings, you get baptized, you're officially in the club, and then for one reason or another, you decide to leave the religion. Same thing happens. You're on the side of the road, Mike the mechanic sees you, he recognizes you. What will Mike the Jehovah's Witness do? I wonder. Well, due to the witness's policy on having no contact with anyone who has been disfellowshipped or disassociated, Mike will drive right past you, even if the storm of the century is going on outside. He will not help you. So now we got another new word there, disfellowship. And if you've watched other XJW videos, you probably heard that one before. So what is that? Well, to discuss that, let's just go through all of the Jehovah's Witness disciplinary actions. So you do something that breaks one of the witness's rules. You go to confess to the elders, or somebody sees you doing it, and they just turn you into the elders. So now what? Well, depending on what it was, you may either get what's called quote-unquote counseled, which is basically like a stern talking to, or you may be required to attend a judicial committee, which means you in a room with 3 elders being interrogated about your wrongdoing for any length of time until they feel they can make a judgment call on how repentant you are. The judicial committee can end without any punishment, but it's pretty rare that that happens. In most cases, the meeting will end with one of 3 disciplinary actions. So let's go through them. So the first one is a private reproof, or silent reproof. This basically means that you got a slap on the hand, and for the next several months, you will no longer be allowed to answer at the meetings during the question and answer parts, and you can't present from the stage. You also cannot handle any meeting privileges, like passing out microphones or running the sound equipment. Now, the second disciplinary action is called a public reproof. Now, it's basically the same thing as a private reproof, except for the fact that your name is publicly announced during the meeting. So imagine this. Halfway through the meeting, an elder gets on stage and he says, so-and-so has been reproved. And that's said in front of 100 plus people in front of your entire congregation. Now, no one will know why you are reproved. They just know you did something severe enough to have your name publicly announced. And if you watch my JW social structures video, you know that having your name announced can have a major impact on your reputation and your family's reputation. Now, the most severe punishment is getting disfellowshipped. So for this, let's create an example. Let's say you have a young girl who decides to sneak out and go to a party, and at the party she meets a boy, and things go a little bit too far. Now for this example, let's say this girl is 17, and you'll understand why I made her that age in a minute. So at the next meeting, she goes to an elder, and she lets him know what happened, and a judicial committee is formed. Now, the reason I made this girl 17 is to really expose the kind of stuff that's going on in judicial committees. This girl is 17, which means she is underaged. But she will be required to sit in a private room with 3 elders, and elders are typically middle-aged to elderly men. And in that room, this underage girl will be required to answer detailed sexual questions about what happened with her and that boy. And I encourage you to watch some of the EXJWs telling their stories about their experiences in these committees. It's invasive, it's highly inappropriate. I'd say it's definitely in the territory of sexual harassment. So let me just repeat that for you. You got an underage girl in a room with 3 old men being required to have a sexually explicit conversation with them. I think we all know that's not right. So after this girl answers every question they want to ask, and let me say that she has no ability to say, I'm not comfortable answering that. So think about that too. So then they send her out of the room to decide her punishment. And let's say they decide that she deserves to be disfellowshipped. So now what? Well, now at the next midweek meeting, an elder will get on stage and make the announcement. And the announcement for getting disfellowshipped is not so-and-so has been disfellowshipped, as you might think. It used to be. But now the announcement is so-and-so is no longer one of Jehovah's Witnesses. And from that point on, no Jehovah's Witness is allowed to have any contact with her. They see her at the mall, they cannot wave, they cannot say hello. In most cases, they'll turn around and walk the other way. She is shunned until she goes through the very long process of getting reinstated. Now, since she is 17, her parents won't be forced to kick her out, but they will have to limit their contact with her. So while she's still living in the same house, she may be asked to eat dinner in a separate room, or she may be left out of family vacations and events. The list goes on. But since we talked about elders, let's just go through the whole witness hierarchy of leadership positions. So the base leadership position is the ministerial servants. Think of them like an elder junior. These are men in the congregation who are seen as examples and who handle some of the congregation duties to lessen the workload on the elders. In most cases, a ministerial servant can do around 70% or so of what an elder can do. Now, the other 30% of responsibilities goes to the elders themselves. You can think of an elder as like an equivalent to a pastor that you would have in a normal church. But the main difference being that in a normal church, you would have one pastor for the whole congregation. In the witnesses, you have multiple elders for every congregation. The elders take the lead in the congregation, and they also have the ability to approve someone for baptism or decide that someone should be disfellowshipped. So if the elders keep the congregation in line, then who keeps the elders in line? Well, that would be the circuit overseer. They typically visit each congregation about every 6 months or so, and they stay for a week each visit. And while visiting, they give special talks, they hold meetings for the pioneers and elders and servants, and in general, they just make sure the congregation is running according to Watchtower standards. They also have the ability to appoint new elders and new ministerial servants. Now, going above the circuit overseers takes us to the top, the governing body. Think of them as the witness equivalent to the Pope. Now, at this time, there are 8 governing body members. And these 8 men have the power to change, add to, and refine literally anything in the Jehovah's Witness doctrine. What they say goes, completely and without question. So whenever the governing body members decide to change the doctrine, they call that quote-unquote new light. So consider this example of how much power the governing body members have. Right now, the Jehovah's Witnesses have a doctrine that says that no Jehovah's Witness man is allowed to have a beard. You can have a mustache, but no beard. Even though every Jehovah's Witness publication shows Jesus with a beard. But we won't go into that. Now let's say the governing body members get quote-unquote new light, a new understanding, and they decide that Jehovah's Witnesses are now allowed to have beards. Well, from that moment forward, that's now okay. Think about this. Even the President of the United States does not have the power to dictate your facial hair. But the Jehovah's Witnesses do. So now let's talk about service. Something Jehovah's Witnesses are known for probably more than anything else. So service is what Jehovah's Witnesses call their ministry work. It's their effort to contact you, whether through door-to-door, letter writing, phone call, or setting up a stand in a busy area in order to teach you, quote-unquote, the truth. Service is required for all baptized witnesses as well as unbaptized publishers. And each month you are required to turn in a field service report to an elder that is over your service group. And in this service report, you must say how many hours of service you did that month, along with the amount of placements you had, studies you did, and other information. So now that you know what service is, let's talk about territory, because that plays a big part in it. So let's say you have a medium-sized city, and somewhere near the center of that city, you'll have a kingdom hall. Now let's split that city up into 4 sections, and each of these sections will represent a congregation territory. Now typically, whatever congregation territory you live in, that will be the congregation that you attend. So when it comes to doing service, JWs can check out a territory, which is a small little section, usually a neighborhood, that is within their congregation's territory boundaries. Then the witnesses would go out as a group and work that territory while also keeping track of any homes where they were not able to contact anyone. And these homes would then go on a list called the Not at Home list, and they would be worked on later. So you're required to go to these strangers' homes and talk to them about your beliefs. So how do you know what you're supposed to say? Well, the organization takes care of that too. Every month, there's a new magazine release, and with each release, the organization will create training videos that are presented at the next meeting that gives you an example of how to present the magazines when you're going door to door. Jehovah's Witnesses also have meeting parts where they do mock presentations or a mock study to practice for those situations. And if that's not enough already, the witnesses also have a special book that contains common questions that they might be asked while out in the ministry and how to answer them. The book also teaches witnesses how to get around quote-unquote conversation stoppers. So you better believe when witnesses come to your door, they're there to play chess, not checkers. They're already thinking 3 steps ahead of you. In fact, witnesses are even instructed to look around when they're coming up to a door and to look and see if there's any items that would point to a person being an animal lover or a parent of a young child. And then they tweak their presentation for that scenario. Now, with all of that in mind, I do have to say I encourage you to be polite when witnesses come by your door. Because in many cases, they're just doing what they're being told to do and just trying to get their service hours in. And yeah, there are some witnesses who truly do enjoy service, but in my experience, and for the majority of witnesses that I talk to, it's honestly more of a chore, especially on super hot days or very rainy days. Now, if you ever don't want witnesses to come to your door, you can be asked to put on their quote-unquote do not call list. And with that request, they will not come back for several years. And when they do come back, it will just be to make sure that the same person lives there and that they still wish to be on the do not call list. So there's your little secret out of it. So now that you know what service is, let's talk about another word you might hear often, which is pioneer. So a pioneer is the only respected title in the congregation that a woman can hold. And a pioneer can be a woman or a man. When it comes to service hours, your average witness probably turns in around like 5 to 10 hours, which translates to going out in service for around 3 hours or so on a Saturday twice a month. However, there is no required amount for service hours. Elders and ministerial servants are encouraged to keep their hours above the average, but that's about it. And for those that turn in no hours continually, they are referred to as inactive, which if you watch my JW social classes video, the inactive ones would definitely be considered quote-unquote bad association. Now for a pioneer, there actually is a required amount of service. Pioneers are required to turn in an average of 70 hours per month. They are also required to commit to a full year of pioneering at minimum. Now I say an average of 70 hours a month because pioneers do have the ability to carry over their hours. So in some cases, a pioneer will do 100 plus hours for a few months just to rack up their hours, and then that way they can take a summer vacation at the end of the service year, which by the way, the service year begins and ends in September. Now making the 70 hours a month typically requires that these pioneers only work part-time or not work at all. Now there's also another tier called special pioneers, which are pioneers who volunteer to move to areas where the Jehovah's Witness presence is much lower, and therefore the service territories are not being worked as often. In some cases, this may require the pioneer to learn a whole new language or move to a whole different continent. And then there's also an auxiliary pioneer, which is a step down. They only require 50 hours a month, and on special occasions, it's even 30 hours a month, and it does not require a full year of commitment. So we've already covered quite a bit, and I don't want to give you too much at once, but I'm going to pick one more topic, and that topic is meetings. So let's get into that. So your average witness will attend meetings about twice a week. Typically there's a Sunday meeting and then a midweek meeting. Now the Sunday meeting usually consists of a 30-minute public talk, which you could think of like a sermon in a regular church. And after the public talk, there's a watchtower study, which is a question and answer part. Now the midweek meeting is like several smaller meetings combined into one. These meetings include a book study, question and answer part, a service meeting to train witnesses for the ministry, and Bible studies. Now I'd say about 50 to 60% of Jehovah's Witness meetings are question and answer, which means even on days when you don't have meetings, you really can't relax and disengage because you have to study for the meetings that are coming up. Now outside the usual congregation meetings, you also have assembly meetings, which are much larger and usually happen twice a year, and you have conventions, which are even larger and only come once a year. Now to give a sense of scale, when I was a witness, in my last congregation, the typical attendance was right around 90 to 110 people on average. The last assembly I attended was around 1,000 to 1,200 people. And the last convention I attended was around 7,500 to 8,500 people. Okay, so we'll stop there for today. But hopefully I've covered enough topics to where you can feel at least a little bit more in the loop. That way when you hear words like paradise or elder or pioneer, you can know what the heck is going on. It's really important to me that the people that were never witnesses can also feel comfortable on this channel, because you guys help us out too. I also hope this video can be of assistance to any newly out ex-Jehovah's Witness who is still getting integrated into normal society. That way when you're dating someone who's never been a witness, or you're making new friends that were never witnesses, or you're getting reconnected with family that were never witnesses, and you're telling them your story, you can show them this and they can have a better idea of what you're coming out of. So I've got a lot more videos on the way, a lot more stuff I want to cover. But if you guys ever need me to, I have no problem doing a JW 102 video or something like that. That way everybody stays in the loop, everybody knows what's going on, and we can all benefit from it. So with that, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for your time. If you liked the video, please hit the like button. If you loved it, please hit the subscribe button, share it with others, and I'll see you guys in the next one.